much have you said to go?
I was quiet and awkward.
Song and dance.
That's
Song and
2
dance.
minutes, so we got a lot of ground.
All right, so let's do it. Okay, so the panel for today is discussing, I think, creating webtoons. I think I'm going to default to my friend Flork here for a lot of it, simply because he has a lot better pedigree than I do, but I can approach it from a different angle. So just a little bit of our backstory. I know that some people did not get the brochures because they only printed, I think, 10 to 15,000 of them. But if y'all have any of them, does anyone have one that they can hold up? There you go. So yesterday, for the first 15,000 people, you received one of those, and so there's some great visual aids in there. But you'll see the Flork. Yeah, there's the Flork over there. So Mr. Flork over here has one of the strongest social media presences on the internet. How many? You're not meaning to brag, but how many Facebook followers do you have? Your community. It's a lot.
3 or 4.
Like 180,000.
Yeah, you know, it's
like
kind of a small number, 180,000.
Yeah, there's bigger ones, but yeah, 180,000 on Facebook.
And he got popular because he has this little sock puppet called the Flork, and it's great for memes, and apparently from what you've been telling me, like adults and kids like it a lot. It's very cute. There's that gentleman over there wearing one of your shirts, actually.
Yeah.
Which is really
I have
cool.
a tattoo.
And he has a tattoo and a dedication right there. Yeah.
Give it up.
Yeah, give it up. So I'm following his lead. I think guys like him have been a pioneer for it. I think a lot of children, a lot of young people, you might be familiar with Merriweather Comics. I think he's the king of webcomics right now. I was very fortunate in having to work with him. We've collaborated twice within the last year with his Florida Girl series, which I'm deeply honored about. That was really cool. But I'll pass it off to you for a little bit. Tell us a little bit of, like, how long ago did you get started doing it? The backstory in terms of how you created the Flork and how you decided to use the social media platforms that you did to get the word out there that you have a comic.
Yeah. Everything I say is going to sound really anticlimactic. I just started because I like posting memes online. And I made a lot of comics when I started, and I made a page because I didn't want to annoy my friends on their feeds with my comics, and then it just sort of took off, and that's it.
So the website is what, thatsockcomic.com?
No, I originally just started on social media. That's
Okay.
how my main platform of delivery is Facebook and Twitter.
Instagram.
Instagram. I don't do videos. I tried to at one point, but it's just not for me. I try to stay to like that media post of just images, and I kind of stick around that. Although there are like voice actors that will dub my comics, a really popular one everyone mentioned me is Seymour, PM Seymour. There's a couple other ones, but really cool when they dub the comics. It's a lot of fun.
But if they want to find you, it's thatsockcomic.com.
Yeah, that's where they're posted, but they're also posted on all social medias. But,
And I think there's a thing that we have to let people know. So you still draw everything in MS Paint.
yeah, everything's done in Microsoft Paint with a mouse.
With a mouse.
With a mouse and Microsoft Paint. The point of that is to kind of show that you don't need these complex tools to make a web comic. You can do that with the most simplest base thing you can get on a computer right now, which is a mouse and a keyboard and paint.
I think the irony is you do it in MS Paint with a mouse, so it's like you're playing on easy mode and hard mode at the same time, which is like a conundrum.
Yeah, so I mainly keep it to those two tools. Of course, I'll use like Radio Blur for Photoshop to kind of deliver a joke, but that's about all outside of MS Paint that I do.
Do you even do the text in MS Paint?
Oh yeah, everything's
Everything.
MS Paint, yeah.
Okay, wow. So I'm more high tech than he is, but just to let people know, so whenever I do our webcomic, we actually have one right now. It's Kamen America, the series, and it's been going for a year. The series is actually, we say it's not really being canceled, but it's transitioning into Kamen Academy, which if you all have the VIP bags, that's the characters that are on the VIP bags. So that's actually going to be the webcomic, which is going to be starting in about 5 weeks, even though we started the groundwork to conclude the current series and transition to the new one as of last week. I talked to a lot of artists, and they say, man, you have to have Photoshop, you have to have a Wacom tablet, you have to have a really high quality, high functioning PC. I think a lot of them are really shocked because I do everything in Procreate on an iPad. Now, as far as expenses are concerned, the iPad is the most expensive thing. You can buy a refurbished iPad that's exactly like mine for about $300. And Procreate is a $4.99 program. And I don't mean $499, I mean $4.99. I do everything on that program, everything. And to this date, I bought that right here at the Target over here in Temple. I bought it in 2016. And I have not upgraded. I use the same tablet I've been using back then. It's an iPad Pro Generation 2, I think is the model. And people are shocked because they're like, you do all that in Procreate? It's like, yeah, it's cheaper than Photoshop, that's for sure. Between the two of us, though, I think there's some platforms that we enjoy using. I put mine on Webtoons. Are you on Webtoons too? Or?
I did try it for a little while, but it's just not for me.
It's not for you. So what platforms do you use, and why do you decide to stick with those in particular?
Well, I tend to use Facebook and Twitter the most because it has the most foot traffic for people coming in and out to view it.
Right.
I could use Instagram more, but I never really got into using it as much. I'll maybe drop a load of comics like once or twice a month into Instagram to catch it up. But it's mostly just Twitter and Facebook because of the algorithm kind of favors how I post in comparison to other platforms.
How do you, I guess when you go into the creative side, how do you come up with the stuff that you come up with? I'm trying to think of one that's actually, I'm like, man, there's a lot of kids at the show and a lot of kids like the Flork, and I'm like, going through the Rolodex of comics he's done in my head, I'm like, that's not safe to talk about, neither is that one, but maybe this one might be good. So tell us a little bit more about like how the creative process works for you.
Sure. You know when you're laying in bed at night and you get like really bad intrusive thoughts?
Yeah. Sure, yeah, all the time.
Yeah, it's like that. It's a lot of brainstorming. Now, you get these random thoughts in your head like, oh wow, what if that guy ate teeth? That'd be a great comic, and it kind of goes from there.
Yeah. What is the one, so obviously, even though it takes a while to build a social media following, there are some people who have been at this for about 10 years and they don't have anywhere near the growth that you do. Can you think of like one thing in particular where it just went viral, like it was just almost like a meme overnight where everyone was sharing it, and you found like, oh my gosh, like I can actually increase by leaps and bounds by just that one creative thing that I've come up with?
Well, in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with luck, whether one of your themes will hit that viral theme that'll make it shareable to a lot of people. But something that I can control is the content quantity that I put out.
You post every day, don't you? Almost.
Usually it's 5 to 7 comics a week on an average week. And that works really well for me to be putting out that much content. Where other people might have a smaller one and they post a comic maybe once every 2 weeks. But for what works for me, because I can do it in such a simple medium, it doesn't take much time, so I can make 7 comics a week, and that's what really works for me.
What was it in particular that made you decide, I tried Webtoons, but it's just not for me? Was it the slow growth, or was it other factors that played a role into that?
The thing because I had to submit the files as JPEG, and I was really lazy, and all my stuff was PNG, and that's it. That's it. I could have saved it, but you know.
So that's a message for the kids. Sometimes hard work does not pay off.
No.
Sometimes it's easier to just use Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to do all of that. That's not quite the answer I was looking for, because what I was looking for was our own Webtoons presence. It's obviously not as strong as some others because we've been only going at it for a year. But Webtoons does have an algorithm that tends to favor some content over others. And I'm not blaming that necessarily for the rate of our current growth on our comic. But on the other hand, we have heard stories, and you can see like on their page what they decide to showcase and what they decide to highlight. And I thought to myself, like, why would they not showcase this for? Like, that's such a hot comic, right?
I'm just really lazy.
You're just really lazy.
I've already given a live, but I got really lazy.
We're going through that right now. I can actually feel your pain because, so right now, all of our comics are being translated to Japanese. So we actually got all the files for all the comics that we've done, more than, my gosh, 200 times 5, which is, I can't do math, like over 1,000 pages. So we've had all of them translated to Japanese, and now we're getting our webcomics translated to Japanese. I'm like, yes, this is gonna be great. But then I realized I'm the guy who has to upload everything. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is so time consuming to do this. I just wanna, I know, grab a Coke and watch some anime or television or whatever. So I know that there's some people out there who are maybe young creators and are maybe thinking about putting your comics out there. I think this can kind of pivot to another topic. There's some people out there who say you should not do webcomics because they're typically free and you never give out content for free. You always get paid for it. I have a very unpopular opinion, and it's that whenever, even though we joke about artists working for exposure, I think the reality is that that's not a bad thing. You should do that because that's how you get noticed. I don't know if you have any insight into that as far as that's concerned, because essentially all your comics are free.
Yeah, what's a good way to put it that's not offensive?
How have you been able to, I guess, how have you been able to get out from the free content to the, hey, this is actually paying off in other ways?
Yeah, a lot of that is time that you put into it, too. You have to kind of build an audience slowly over time, and that's kind of where a lot of younger artists drop off in. They don't see an explosion in the first month or two of them doing something.
And then they get
discouraged, and oh, my comic's so bad. But that's often not the case at all. It just takes a really long time to build an audience. And from where I am right now to about 7 years from when I started to now. What was the question?
The criticism that webcomics gets is that it's essentially free content.
Oh.
And a lot of artists who have been at it for a while, the rule of thumb is you never work for free, you never work for exposure, you never give out the goods for free. And my philosophy, and I think our philosophy, is no, because there's kind of an end game. There's something that you're working towards. And I guess for you, the way you've been able to successfully capitalize on it is you start selling merchandise. And so in a way, the comics, yes, the content is free, but you are actually advertising for something that can actually make money for you.
Yeah, that's the best way that I feel how to do it. There's other people that'll put their comics kind of behind a paywall, and if that works for them, fine, that's great. But for me, what worked for me is making everything as much free as possible. And you can edit everything and have as much fun as you want with it. But if you want like merchandise, like dolls or whatever, then I sell that, and that's where a lot of money from it comes from. Not every comic is able to do that. A lot are able to do that through like stickers. A really good example is Extra Fabulous. Do any of you follow him or read him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he has a really good idea where he has a Patreon, but every month you get a special tier where he sends you an envelope full of stickers, other this cool stuff, and that works really well for him. That's how he kind of monetizes a lot of what he does, and it's a really genius way of how he does it. It's like a sticker club.
Is Extra Fabulous the same as Zach Fabulous, or the same guy?
Yeah, they're the same guy.
Okay.
Yeah, Zach Fabulous.
Yeah, so recently, he ran a Kickstarter, and the thing that he did was he basically just compiled all the comics that he had created, and he made $1 million on publishing it. And it's interesting because I was like, I remember someone saying like, oh my gosh, that's like mind-blowing. It's like, I always thought that the end goal for a lot of us is after you have all these comics finished, you would compile them and you could sell it as like a physical thing. Because by that time, you make the decision to print something because you know you have the audience that's going to buy it. I mean, that was kind of our end game, was people were saying like, oh, these people are kind of idiots. They're putting out free comics like every week. And I'm like, they're free
The
right
same
now.
thing can be said about like newspaper comics.
Newspaper comics,
And
they
they
do
ended up making a compilation book eventually.
like Garfield.
Yeah, I mean, it comes free with the newspaper, it's kind of the same thing that works online. We're kind of like your really bad newspaper. You get it? So,
We're a newspaper where it's a little bit age restricted, you know?
just a little bit.
Sometimes it's PG-13, sometimes it's all ages, you never know.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're doing too with Kamen Academy, is that, so it is more work for me because I'm the artist, so I mean, it's hard enough having to draw 200 something pages a year, but now I have to do like a weekly strip. And so people have been saying like, this guy's gonna kill himself because he's doing a strip for essentially nothing. It's free because all my stuff is on Webtoon. It's like, no, because essentially it's an advertisement for the stuff that we do want people to hopefully buy, which is the comic books and the merch and stuff like that. And Buddy the Flork here, I mean, obviously he's done a really good job. You can see the hat he's wearing. You can see the t-shirt that gentleman over there is wearing. Yesterday I saw people with plush toys. I have 2 myself, and I think you're almost out of them if you haven't already sold out already.
Yeah, I have like 8 of them left.
He has like 8 of them. He has action figures. So he's been actually ahead of the game longer than we've been. And so I saw that he had actually thanked Zach Fabulous as being one of the pioneers for him who kind of helped them and kind of showed the ropes in terms of how to get started and how to actually make it lucrative and work for you. So I would say to all the young people out there, if you do have someone saying like, don't put out a webcomic because you're not going to make money off of it, well, you won't necessarily now, but you have to kind of think long term how you can use that and leverage it to your advantage later on. Because if you're popular, then there are ways to make a living off of it, or at least make some money off of it.
Yeah, if somebody's telling you not to do something that you should be doing, the thing that they're telling you not to do, that's probably one of the best advice if you're starting an art page or a comic or anything like that, a YouTube account. Just keep making the content, because if your readers or viewers see consistency, that's kind of what they want more sometimes, is something to regularly read or watch. So.
I'll tell you a big one. So I've got to know this man for the last 3.5 days, and his comics are so outrageous. I thought he would be like this like party animal, but he's like a I go to sleep at 9 o'clock type of person, and he's very humble. But I think he's too humble to bring this up, but he just recently had a deal with Heinz ketchup in Brazil. And so you can actually go on Instagram and you can actually see the Heinz ketchup ad with like the dancing Flork on it who puts on his sunglasses. So it's just crazy. I mean, would you have ever thought, like in a million years, like, hey, one day your character is going to be on like a ketchup bottle?
No, when I started my comic, mostly I was drawing a lot of like this cookie cutter board with paper. I had like a broken down couch in my house. And then I went to MS Paint, and now I'm on Heinz.
Now you're on Heinz, yeah, exactly, with an animated thing.
Yeah.
And that's not the end of it. So are there any other things like that you can actually talk about right now? I know that you have some stuff in the works, but...
I can't yet, because I might be under some
NDA.
Yeah, but there are other things coming up, yeah.
Good. Yeah, so I mean, as far as the web stuff is concerned, so obviously you have social media, which is free. In terms of just the platform to use it. You do have paywalls and Patreons, Webtoon like we talked about. There's some other ones that have grown in popularity. I know Tapas is one that people have been talking about. Gumroad is another one. Those are all platforms where I think Tapas, I don't think there's a paid subscription, but I think Gumroad is essentially almost like an online store. You can offer things for free if you want, or you can actually charge people to actually see the content that you produce. So there's other ways of getting your content out there and having it available to a lot of people. I guess the next thing we'll talk about is your format. So again, you don't have to go fancy. In Webtoon, they do a thing called the infinite scroll. And the way infinite scroll works is modern comics typically read either left to right in the case of the West, or they read from right to left in the case of manga. Webtoon is a little bit more, in my opinion, it's more challenging because the infinite scroll goes up and down, and it's a cascade, and we find that the most profitable or the best webtoons are the ones where they take that into consideration and to their advantage. So you would have like a webtoon where, let's say for humorous effect, you would have like a Flork and it's screaming like, ah! What you would do is you would just have that scream going all the way down vertically, endlessly, until you get to like the little Flork at the bottom. That's something that you can only pull off in the infinite scroll that you can't pull off in a comic, because you could probably do it left to right, page after page after page, but the beauty of it is that it's better if you're able to see it as like one cohesive whole. Or on the other hand, like what the Flork does over here is with little MS Paint drawings, he's able to kind of convey the same effect. So I think that what it really boils down to is you just have to kind of start thinking creatively in terms of what you're trying to achieve. That really what it boils down to is the idea and the concept and how solid it is. His comics are, they're endearing because the characters are so cute, but it really is the humor in them. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, I got introduced. It was actually a friend of ours named the Nerd Wonder, and she was the one who said, you should check out this strip because I think that you'd like it. And it turns out he was reading our content at the same time, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But it's two very different worlds. Obviously, in the world of comics, it's a lot more action-oriented. There's a lot of time and detail. Everything has to be anatomically correct. And then here, the Flork just has spark after spark of good idea, and that's it. And that's all that it requires to do it. So how is your work day like? Are you okay, I'm on MS Paint. It's a good 5 minutes. I think I'm done for the day. And then, do you move on to the next strip for the next day, or is that it?
So I have usually scheduled work days throughout the week. Okay, I want to make X comics this day, this day, this day. But how I would do it is I would make one comic and I would be like washing the dishes or something, and I think of something, and I'll immediately go and make it right away and post it right as I think of it. That or I usually kind of brainstorm in like a notepad or like somewhere else as I go. And I'll keep those ideas for when I finally do sit down, and then I'll knock them out all at once. Usually get them done in a big batch and post all at once.
What web comics do you like to read? Do you ever read other people's web comics for inspiration?
I mean, I read them for fun.
For fun?
So I read like Cyanide Happiness, Extra Fabulous,
Yeah.
Letterbox Comics. What's another good one? Well,
Merriweather.
Merriweather, yeah, I read Merriweather. I read some of that. I wouldn't say that like I get inspired to make comics off of that, but I do enjoy reading other people's comics quite a lot.
Yeah, you brought up Cyanide and Happiness. In a way, I almost feel like your comic is like a spiritual successor to them because they kind of have the same thing where they use very rudimentary panels to get their story through. Would you say that that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, they were one of the people that inspired me to make comics in the first place, because I remember reading Chris Wilson when he first started out at DVR, like, goodness, like 15 years ago.
I think he's still going at it. Isn't
Yeah, well,
he?
yeah, they're all still going at it.
Yeah.
They're machines, too. But that's kind of what inspired me to kind of make comics in the form that I make them now.
Right.
Is Cyanide and Happiness.
You familiar with Sinfest? A relatively older one.
No, what?
It's called Sinfest.
I don't know.
It's about an angel and a devil. And
Oh.
they're always trying to like tempt this guy to like do stuff.
I might have missed that one. There have been so many throughout the years, I maybe don't remember it.
I know the youngins in here, they're probably up to date on all of this like web comics and stuff like that. But yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can get your stuff out there, and like I said, it's free. And I think that's the only hindrance to it is people telling you that you don't get paid for it. That being said, I know that we have like a lot of young people in here, so feel free to ask questions at any time if anything occurs to you in terms of ideas or how you get started or the platforms that you use, anything of that nature. That's what kind of we're here for. We're more than happy to talk to all of you. One thing that we all try to do is some artists too, what they'll do is they'll take their comic books and they'll kind of tear them apart, panel by panel, and upload those onto Webtoon. That, I think, is a little bit riskier because it's always a double-edged sword. Their idea is you can take a comic, you can tear it apart, you can put it out for free, and the hope is that people like it enough that they'll actually buy the physical medium. Because we know how it is nowadays. Everything's going digital. But there is something to be said about the physical medium because you want to hold it. I've heard horror stories of people who are like watching, they're binge watching like Breaking Bad, and they're like, all right, here we are, I have one episode left, and then it's like Netflix is like, sorry, but it's off, and it's gone, and you can't access it anymore, and you hope and pray that you can go on Amazon and buy like the Blu-ray box set to complete it. But I've seen occasions, especially with anime, I have a Crunchyroll account, and there have been times where I put off watching a show, and then it's gone, and I think to myself, that's okay, I'll just go buy it off Amazon. But silly me, it's not on there because it was never put on to like any type of physical medium. So there's always like that risk that you run that sometimes with the content you put out there just isn't to anyone's taste. But I would argue that that's true for anything. Part of marketing is A, you want to get in front of people, but B, the product has to be good or else they're not going to come back and see what else you have to deliver. So just because you succeed in the webcomics world, don't get lazy, so to speak. You have to always be kind of working at it and coming up with new ideas. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. I've lost a lot of anime like that.
Okay. And you also have where we get our ideas and inspiration, you have a Discord, right? Is it private or is it public?
It's through Patreon.
It's through Patreon, okay. And do you actually get ideas from there too? Like, do you accept ideas, or is it?
Sometimes, not too often. I don't poke in there too often, but sometimes.
Right. Do you pay them for the ideas? You're like, hey, I'm going to slip you a 20 if I can use it for my strip. Yes.
No, what was the question?
Do you actually get ideas from people and you like pay them? Or you're like, hey, I really like that idea. It's completely original, this man here. It's a genius. All right. I don't know what other questions that people might have. If anyone has any, we'll open the floor for that.